Depending on what container you're using Handbrake to create, either an MP4 or MKV file, there are several options for what audio streams may be included. Depending on your source, Dolby Digital, DTS, and AAC audio may all be available. Before we talk about exactly how to set Handbrake's audio options, let's first consider some common audio formats, starting with AAC or Advanced Audio Coding. AAC uses lossy compression, meaning quality is lost from the source, but it doesn't take as much space to store as some other compressed formats. This is the default format for audio in an MP4 file. By default, Handbrake will encode most audio tracks to AAC, although pass-through, which means just copying from the source with no re-encoding, is available for some formats. Ironically, AAC pass-through isn't available, so if your source already has AAC audio, it will be re-encoded for your output file. AAC audio is typically stereo, meaning there are two separate or discrete channels. It may also have just a single channel, or 6 channels for discrete surround, consisting of left, right, center, left surround, and right surround for rear speakers, and low frequency for a subwoofer. The subwoofer channel is commonly referenced by adding 0.1 to the number of channels, as in 5.1 or 2.1, to indicate it's just complementary to the main channels. Surround information can also be matrixed in a stereo AAC track, meaning there are only 2 discrete channels, but they include additional information which can be decoded by surround-aware equipment to add unique center and rear channels during playback for Dolby Surround, or center, left surround, and right surround channels for Dolby Pro Logic 2. LPCM, which is found primarily on music DVDs, is uncompressed, lossless audio. This means you don't lose quality like with AAC, but it takes up a lot of space for the amount of information it contains, because it isn't compressed at all. LPCM tracks rarely have more than 2 channels, although they may also rarely include matrixed surround information. The most common audio format you're likely to encounter in your source files is Dolby Digital, also called AC3. AC3 streams may have anywhere from 1 to 6 discrete channels, including left, right, center, left surround, right surround, and low frequency. Handbrake allows you to pass through Dolby Digital tracks or encode them to AAC. Like AAC, AC3 is a lossy format, although not as efficient as AAC, meaning it takes up more space on a disc. AC3 audio is found on most DVDs and many Blu-ray discs. It's also commonly used for digital TV broadcasts. There are also newer Dolby Digital formats which aren't as well supported by Handbrake. Dolby Digital Plus is similar to regular Dolby Digital, but with more channels and a few other enhancements. Handbrake doesn't recognize these tracks at all, so it can neither pass through nor re-encode them. Dolby True HD is a losslessly compressed format, meaning it offers the quality of LPCM, but takes up much less space. However, it does require significantly more space than any lossy format. True HD audio streams also include an embedded AC3 stream called the Core, intended to make them playable on legacy equipment and allowing software which can't decode the lossless information to read them. Handbrake is a perfect example of this. It can pass through or re-encode the core of a True HD audio track, just like any regular Dolby Digital stream, but it can't access the lossless portion at all. If you're preparing your Blu-ray sources using TS Muxer, you might as well go ahead and downmix to just keep the AC3 core instead of keeping the entire Dolby True HD track, which Handbrake won't be able to do anything with. A less common but still very important surround format is DTS. DTS tracks can be found on some DVDs, but due to taking up much more space than a Dolby Digital track with the same number of channels, it's not at all common. Where it's much more common is on Blu-ray discs, because the disc space required is much less of an issue, with video streams being so much larger than DVDs. Like Dolby Digital, there are also higher quality and lossless variants called DTS HD High Resolution Audio and DTS HD Master Audio respectively. Both include a core containing standard DTS information. Handbrake can pass through either a regular DTS stream or the core from a DTS HD stream, but only for creating MKV files. DTS in MP4 is not supported. As with Dolby True HD, if you're using TS Muxer to prepare your sources ahead of time, it's a good idea to just take the DTS core portion of a DTS HD stream so you're not getting information that you don't need. There are a lot of criteria you might use for deciding what sort of audio track you want to keep with your video file. Instead of covering all the possibilities, which could take forever, I'll instead try to look at some real-world scenarios and explain why I would pick a particular audio format. First, I'll start with the DVD source being converted to MKV for a Media Center PC. The PC is connected to a home theater receiver with a standard surround speaker setup. Since quality is my primary consideration rather than size, I'll want to pass through either DTS or Dolby Digital 5.1 audio. Handbrake has automatically selected a 2-channel Dolby surround track for me and set it to encode with AAC. Those are not the options that I want because that won't give me the highest quality. Of the tracks I have, since there are no DTS tracks, I can definitively say that the AC3 5.1 channel or Dolby Digital file is the best option. So I'll select that. But I don't want to encode it to AAC. I want to keep the original. Therefore, I'm going to select AC3 pass-through. Now the additional options become grayed out simply because those are processing options that don't apply when you're copying the audio. And that's it for selecting that track. But this DVD also has several commentary tracks, 2 of which I would like to keep. You can see them listed, the 2-channel English, English, English. Typically those will always be commentary tracks when you see extras like that. In order to add these tracks, I'll use the Add Track button. Just click it twice. It will duplicate whatever was selected already. And that's fine, because now I can go back to my list and select the first commentary track, then select the second new audio track, and also add the third commentary track. Since I'm not so much worried about quality with these, more about size, I'm going to go ahead and encode to AAC. That opens up these options, which I'll also look at. Mixdown refers to including certain effects in your audio track. For example, if you have a 2-channel audio track, you can put matrix surround in Dolby Surround or Dolby Pro Logic 2 format. You can also create an AAC file which has 6 separate channels, just like a Dolby Digital or DTS surround track. Unfortunately, you can't expect this to be decoded by your home theater receiver, and therefore you will need equipment that can decode that 6-channel track and then send it through separate analog connections or through an HDMI connection to your home theater receiver. Those devices are not particularly common, so you won't use it very often. In this case, it's only a 2-channel source to begin with, so there's no need to add any surround information. So I'll select stereo. For sample rate, I'll leave it set at auto. That will give me the same output sample rate as the input source. Bit rate, I'm going to leave at 160. I like to have a high quality AAC file, and 160 is still more compressed than the original AC3 audio would have been. DRC, or Dynamic Range Control, is something that's used in surround sound tracks to make the quiet sounds and the loud sounds close enough together that you don't have to turn up the volume to ridiculous levels to hear the quiet sounds or blow yourself out of your chair from the volume of your home theater receiver. Setting DRC to 1 will essentially copy the DRC information out of your surround sound track and put it in your AAC file. For something like a home theater application, this is ideal. Now I'll duplicate these settings on the other commentary track. AAC, stereo, 160, and DRC of 1. And if you see here, I've actually somehow changed my selection somewhere along the way. That does happen sometime in Handbrake. You just have to go back and fix what you've messed up. And there are all my selections from my home theater encode. Now let's say I'm starting with the same source, but this time I want it to fit on a 1 GB memory card to play on my smartphone, which has a resolution of 852 by 480. My primary concern is size because I want as much space as possible for the video, which I'll be leaving at the original DVD resolution. Since I'll be listening to this video through headphones, I'm not as worried about quality, and I'm not worried at all about surround information. I could select the 5.1 channel track and then use the mix down to mix it down to either stereo or surround. However, since there's already a 2-channel alternative which may be mixed better for stereo, I'm going to select that instead. I could select pass-through instead of encoding to AAC. That would result in an audio track that wouldn't be too big. However, one advantage that I'm going to get by going ahead and selecting AAC is that I can now change the DRC to a higher level. That's because I'll be listening to it through headphones, and headphones don't have nearly the range of volumes, especially when you have them turned down so as not to annoy the people around you, that a home theater setup has. So I'm going to crank this all the way up to 2.5. Even though there is some surround information contained in this track, I could select Dolby Surround, but since I'm listening through headphones and will never have any surround speakers or center channel, I'm going to go ahead and select stereo. And that's all there is to selecting an audio source for a mobile device encode. Finally, let's go through one more scenario. This time I'll be starting from a Blu-ray source and making a backup on DVD-9 so I can watch it on my laptop while I'm away from home. I may also be playing it through the computer in my office, which is configured with a 5.1 speaker system. This time I'm looking for higher quality than in the previous example, even though both were for a mobile copy. My source has a DTS track, but given the equipment I'll be playing it through, at best 5.1 speakers connected to a computer, there's no point in selecting it. It will take up around 20% of a dual-layer DVD, and that's a lot of space. Instead, I'm going to go with the AC3 5.1 channel or Dolby Digital track. Once again, I'm looking for quality, and I'm not too worried about size, so I'm going to set it to AC3 pass-through, once again disabling all of these options. And that's all there is to selecting the audio for that particular file. Obviously there are many more combinations than I could cover right now, but hopefully what you get from this is an understanding that your choice of audio tracks and format will be dependent on your storage and playback needs, and in most cases it's a trade-off between the two. Once you're happy with your audio selection, you can move on to the subtitles tab.